I'm going to talk to you today about three things. One, I'm going to convince you all why sales education is awesome. Number two, we're going to talk about then how you can jump on the sales bandwagon. So after I've convinced you all that sales education is amazing, then we're going to talk about what are the steps you can take to actually start, to actually, whether that's teach a sales class, to take the next step and build the sales program. Okay? And then lastly, we're going to be talking about what do companies wish that our students knew about sales. Okay? So I'll talk about some of the research we've done in sales education and what are the things that executives are saying that they wish they knew and wish that our students taught. All right, so first, why should you care about sales education? So I'm going to convince you in 5 pictures why sales education is incredibly important and why we should be teaching it and why it's growing. All right, so number one. So Gartner, the research company, they looked at business students throughout their whole careers. And one of the things they asked is what % of business majors work in sales at some point in their career? Now, this isn't like, oh, everyone works in sales because you have to sell something to your boss. Like, this is actually like a formalized sales role. So what do you think? What % of business students will work in sales at some point in their career? Higher. 80%. So 80% of business majors will work at sales at some point in their career. Now remember, this is an actual formalized sales role in a sales organization. So this is finance majors, supply chain majors, accounting majors, right? Because within marketing, we often think about sales as like an entry-level position. But if you work in accounting or you work in consulting and you've been there for like 10, 15, 20 years, after you learn how to be a bean counter, what's the next step? You go into business development and you find business, right? That's what they do. And so for a lot of industries, sales is a very prestigious position to get into. All right, number two, this one's one of my favorites. Okay, so LinkedIn did a study where they looked at all the CEOs on their platform. So every CEO that's on LinkedIn that has the title CEO and is at a company that's greater than 50 employees. And they asked themselves, what is the very first job function of these individuals? Like, what did these individuals do when they very first entered the workforce? And then they ranked them from most likely to least likely. Hey, where do you think sales fit in those? So in the rankings of CEO's first job function, where did sales fall? You can probably think number one because it's in my presentation. It's actually number 2, but here's what's super interesting is that number 1 is business development, which in most organizations, especially in tech, is sales. Okay, so it's not just that a lot of people are going to work at sales at some point in their career. It's that sales prepares you for the C-suite. And I hope you can kind of see where I'm going. These are the same slides I show my students on the first day, in the first week, when they're like, I just took this class because it fit my schedule. And I'm like, guys, this is going to be a game changer for your career. Okay, here's my third reason why sales is important is that sales careers are super lucrative. So this is the average compensation for an account executive working in enterprise sales. Okay, so enterprise sales, this means you're selling to large organizations. These are people who have been out post-graduation like 6-7 years. Okay, so I'm telling my students that if you stick with this, right, it's going to be a grind in the beginning, but if you stick with this, then this is the average compensation, right, that you're looking at. All right, so, I don't want to get ahead of myself here. So maybe now you're thinking, all right, this is cool, but like, I'm too far behind. Like, I'm never going to get my administration to start a sales program, and we have one sales class, but no one's really that excited about it. And I'm here to tell you that almost everyone is in your same shoes. because sales education is so young still. Now, maybe your university has had a sales class for a long time, but it's kind of just like that one odd class, right, that students occasionally take. But if we look at like the bigger picture of sales programs, there's 134 universities that the SEF, that's the Sales Education Foundation, that meet the criteria for having a sales program. And here's what's so cool, is that like 50% of those, right, have been established within like the last decade. So if you're thinking like, man, my school's so far, you're not. You're not. And this has been from our research that we've done, right? This is very similar to how also sales executives see a sales education. Like I had a conversation with a sales exec at Adobe, and he said that, you know, it used to be I would go to recruit at a university, and the business schools would be like, the business students would be like, what sells? Right? Like, why would I come work? And then I tell them about it, how much money they can make, and what a great work-life balance. Like I had to sell them. And he said, now I go to universities, and students know. You know, 10 years ago, I couldn't recruit because no one knew what sales was, and now I can. And so this is the same industry trend we're seeing. This is the same in universities. So we're not behind, right? This is our opportunity to really jump on the sales bandwagon. And then lastly, this is my last picture, if you're not already convinced, is that companies are willing to donate a lot of money to universities to help build their sales program. So this is the different donor levels at one of the US-based large sales programs. I won't tell you which one. It's definitely not ours. Okay? But as you can see, like, companies are willing to donate a lot of money to be a part of this because you have access to their most scarce resource, which is your sales talent. And so this gets administration really excited when you talk about building sales, because you start to bring outside companies who are willing to donate money, right? And then you get administration's ears. So we'll talk a little about this part in just a little bit. All right, so now you're all drinking the sales Kool-Aid, right? You're all super excited. So let me tell you now where you can start. And some of you probably have established sales programs already, and I'll try and get some points here that will still be meaningful, but some of you probably are just here, right, because you didn't want to move rooms. And that's okay, because everything that's on here from the beginning or from very beginners to the established hopefully will be relevant. So number one is all you need is a single class. And I can't emphasize this enough. So when I talk to sales educators or people who use my textbook who want to build a sales program, and they're like, oh, but I can't get administration support, and I can't start a fellowship to get funding. I'm like, no, like, all you need is a single class. Because sales can be a +1 education strategy. You don't need a sales major or a minor or a certificate. It could be, I major in finance plus I'm trained in sales. I'm a marketing student plus I took a couple sales classes. And so we're teaching students about how sales fits within their overall framework of their education. Okay? But once you have a single sales class, now you have a platform. And now you can start to involve outside companies. So I see like my class is like a platform, like a two-sided platform that brings companies and students together. And because once I do that, now you can start bringing these outside companies, because that's the two things that business schools care about: jobs and money. And bringing outside companies brings off those. And I'll talk a little about how to do that in just a little bit. All right, number two, once you have a sales class, you can start to overcome what I think is the biggest obstacle in sales education, and that is the mindset about what sales is. Not just among students, but also among professors. Right, Jeff? Jeff's another professor at BYU with me, and I'm sure he thinks sales is stupid. Okay? And that's okay. I'm just kidding. I don't think Jeff thinks that. He's a great guy. Okay? But this is what most of us think of when we think of sales. This is what most of my students think when they take my class. Bonus points if you can reference this movie. Matilda, yes, Matilda. All right. So this is Danny DeVito, and he plays Matilda's foster dad. He's a used car salesman, and he's like as sleazy and conniving as an quintessential example of what we think of salespeople. So a large portion of what we need to do in sales education is just convince students that this is not what sales is, right? That sales really is about developing relationships, long-term value relationships. So in my class, we refer to salespeople as professional problem solvers. That my job is to get to the root of your problem and then help you develop a solution. Now, how do I do that? So a large portion of my class is just giving, and you can implement this in I think in whatever class you teach, whether it's sales or not, is I give tons of examples of what sales is. And some of this involves having guest speakers come in. But on the very first day, I'll talk about my friend who works at Qualtrics, who sells his customer engagement software to large companies like Google. Talking about my friend who works at AWS. His job is to sell Amazon's cloud services to government agencies. My friend who works in pharmaceutical sales and medical sales. And then all of a sudden students are like, wow, like I never really thought about this as being what a sales career is. And the guest speakers talk about, hey, like I make a lot of money and I have great work-life balance. It's also very entrepreneurial. Like I'm in charge of my own schedule, right? I answer to someone once a quarter. Did I meet my quota? Besides that, like I get to do things my way. And it makes students very excited about opportunities to move forward in their career. All right, number 3, so after I have a class, right, after I've changed the mindset, now it's my opportunity to start to bring in outside companies. Now this can be done through guest speaking, or at BYU, we have twice a month we have trainings. Companies come in and talk about like advancing methodologies within sales. Companies come in and they host competitions. They host competitions in my class, and outside my class, we host mixers and networking events and different sponsorship opportunities. Because remember, you have access to their most coveted resource, which is sales talent. And this is our sell to companies, right? That our sales program is the platform by which you're going to build organic relationships with our students. Because my top students don't want to go into sales when they come to the business school. And my students don't want to go to career fairs. They don't want to blindly submit applications on LinkedIn. They want to get to know you. So what we're offering you is an opportunity to get in front of students and convince them that your sales role is the right fit for them. Because otherwise, you're not going to get in front of them and you're not going to talk to them. And they're willing to pay a lot of money to do that. And so those opportunities can come, right? So if you have an established sales program like the different sponsorship levels I showed you, right? That's really easy. They kind of develop and donate to different fellowships. But like, if your school doesn't have that, that's okay. You can just say, hey, Lauren, I know you love coming to my class. You love coming to our events. You've hired a couple of really awesome students that you wouldn't have otherwise. Okay? What I want you to do is I want you to sponsor the travel for my students to go to this sales competition in Florida. Right? Or I want you to come and I want you to host a sales competition and bring some, like a couple $1,000s worth of prizes. And they're willing to do that. So my point is, no matter where you are on the spectrum, right, to having like a formalized way to raise money to not, like companies want to be involved and they're willing to do so. And this is where it helps you as an educator, right? Because remember I said that this platform serves a purpose of giving things that administration cares about, students, jobs, and money. But it gives you an opportunity to bless the students' lives, because these are all things that they wouldn't have been able to do otherwise, right? And my goal is to be 100% funded. I never want to ask for money, because people like Jeff are at my school and they're mean and they won't give me any. Okay? And so I want to be 100% self-funded. And so all the things we do, right, they bless students. I don't get any of the money, but they all go to advance these students' careers. Okay? All right, any questions so far about any of this? I'll also do some Q&A at the end if you have any. Hey, so now you're all drinking the Kool-Aid in sales education. I've told you a little bit, right, 3 steps you can do to just get started. So now I want to answer what I think the big question is, which is like, what should I teach in my sales curriculum? Or what I think is even a better question, worded, or the same question, worded a better way, what do companies wish my students knew? Okay, so before me and my co-author Donald wrote the professional selling textbook for Stukin and the advanced selling textbook, we talked to lots of sales executives. And we said, what do you wish your students knew? Your entry-level sellers, what are you missing? Now, we did some research and we looked at what are the other sales textbooks that are out there and where are the gaps, but we were mostly interested in like what are the students not learning? It was super interesting because we thought we would get a lot of really like high-level things, like, oh, our students need better communication skills, which they came up, but the executives gave us like some really like actionable items. So I'm going to share those with you, and I'll talk a little about how I implement them, okay? And you can think about how you can implement this in your particular classroom, and whether that's sales or not. Yeah. And for me, yeah, at BYU, this is just one course. Yeah, just one course. Great question. All right, so number 1, executive after executive told us, I need students who know how to prospect creatively because it is becoming so difficult to reach our customers. Okay. So this is, excuse me, a quote from a CEO of a sales consultancy. He said that when I meet with sales leaders, right, so these are people who are prospective customers, and I ask them, why did you take the call with my BDR? BDR stands for Business Development Rep. Okay, so the BDR's role is to make initial appointments for this sales consultancy leader. The most common answers I hear are 1, the BDR was persistent, and 2, the BDR was creative. The BDR found interesting ways to reach out to me. Now, why is this critical? Because especially with the impact of COVID, the number of emails that people are getting just have increased substantially. What do you think? What is the average number of emails that an office worker gets per day? This is from Campaign Monitor. Stop it. 121 emails. It is so hard to get through the fluff. So what we teach, and this is just an example, I'm not saying you have to do this, but one of the really new upcoming methods is video emails. So this is an actual embedded video in the email. So this isn't like you take a video with your phone and then attach it. This is an actual video email software that embeds the video, and then the video becomes the content of the email. And we teach students about how to be really creative at the beginning, how to really get the person to watch the whole video. Now, maybe you're saying, well, that's not very professional, right? It's kind of hokey. Research shows that video emails over traditional emails increase open rates and reply rates from 15 to 20%. Right, those of you who work in digital marketing, if I said I could increase your open rate by 20%, like that's huge. Right? So, yeah, maybe in 15 years this won't be the new thing. We'll have to teach something else. But right now, like video emails, what we're seeing and the research supports this is just absolutely killing it for business development. Okay? Another thing we teach is not just like methods, but also just how to think creatively about the way you reach out to people. So this is from a conversation with a sales executive. Those of you who aren't from the Intermountain West here, so BYU and the University of Utah are very big rivals. And this sales executive, he said that last year, I got like thousands and thousands of emails from salespeople, and I just trashed all of them except for one. So now you can imagine my thinking, like, well, what was the one? What was it about? He said, a BDR sent me an email, because I graduated from the University of Utah, and this BDR graduated from BYU. It was right before the football game. And he said, hey, I saw on your LinkedIn, you went to the U of U. I'm a huge BYU fan. If BYU wins, you take a call with me. If University of Utah wins, I'll send you a sweatshirt. All you need to do is reply yes to this email. And he said, I replied yes. Just so happens that BYU won for the first time in 9 years. And he said, that's the only BDR meeting I've taken this year. He said, but I was so impressed with his ability to think differently, to think creatively, outside the box. So a lot of what we teach students within sales is just how to reach out to people creatively. All right, number two, a lot of people said, hey, with students right now, we find that they are very they're very strategic thinkers, but their ability to verbalize that is really been diminished over the last few years, right? With all the texting and IMing and social media. I need students who really know how to communicate, particularly in finding what customers want. And so what we teach is, well, actually, anyone know who this is? Statue, famous Socrates, yes. So we teach the Socratic method, which is essentially asking questions, taking something the customer says, and then decomparting into different avenues, different problems, and you have to do this in your head simultaneously, and then asking follow-up questions to get to the point or the root cause of the issue. And so what we do is we do a lot of work in role-playing and teaching students how to do that. And a lot of the time we emphasize, hey, we know that you are worried about what to say next, but if you will just listen to the customer, it's going to be so much easier to think of what the next follow-up question is. So a lot of this, too, is just teaching what to emphasize in terms of customer discovery and listening. All right, number three is how to plan and how to do research. Okay, I found this stat from Forbes super interesting, right? Nearly 2/3 of the time spent on non-revenue generating activities. Sales executives told us, your students are very good at being active, but they're not productive. I need people who know what to work on and how to go out those things. So we just teach students how to break down your day. So, and this is very similar to what we do when we do trainings with companies, is we'll just say, okay, salespeople, write down everything you did yesterday. And now I want you to break that down into things that will bring you money, right? Essential administrative tasks that will help bring you money, and then non-essential tasks. And it's super interesting for them to be able to see how much time they spend on non-revenue generating activities. Okay? So we actually teach them how to weekly plan, and then we do activities. This is the simulation, right, where they actually have to go in. They have to use some sales analytics to look at what, if I have a certain quota of a number of new customers, right, how many prospecting hours do I have to use in order to get to that prospecting quota? Now here's what I think is super interesting. When we wrote this chapter, I thought it was super boring. This was my co-author Donald Kelly's idea. He said, BJ, we have to include it. Like, based on the conversation we've had with executives, we have to include, this is what they want our students to know, how to plan. I think that's so boring. So when I wrote the chapter, I'm like, this is boring. When I wrote the slides, I'm like, this is boring. First time I taught it, I'm like, this is so boring. My students are probably so super bored. At the end of the semester, I have all of my students write like their end of semester paper is a 4-page paper on what are the 4 most important things you learned this semester and how will you apply it. It is an incredibly useful activity for both the students and yourself. I highly recommend it. What do you think is the number one thing that students wrote about every semester I've taught this? Planning. Right? I learned so much about how to plan and how to be productive and how to just make my life more productive. So now, guess what's one of my favorite chapters to teach? Okay, the chapter on planning. All right, and then I'll make this my last one. I'll skip the next one. Using social media to sell. So sales executives said, we need students who know how to use social media to sell. Now, the problem is that most of my students think that selling on social media is I connect with you, and then what do? I spam you. So a lot of what we teach is about, one, like how to use your LinkedIn almost, because a lot of people use it as like a search engine, right? So how to optimize it that way. But also how to build organic relationships on LinkedIn and then how to use that to sell. So we use a 3-step process. So we focus on what we call trigger events. So what's an event that happens in someone's career or something they post that triggers you as a salesperson to say, hey, this person may be ready to buy. And then I immediately start spamming them. No. Right? That's the second. The second part of the steps is, a trigger event is the first, and then the second is an organic conversation. So a lot of what we teach students is the type of questions to ask that will generate responses. So I want to have like a 3 to 4 step response conversation with you until I get to the part where I sell, and that's the third step, is the selling. Okay? And then number 5, if I had time, I was going to talk about how to use analytics to sell. This is something executives really emphasize, which we teach as well.